This is it, the very first Charl Chats, the e-commerce podcast. My name's Nick, I'm the founder of Charl, a Shopify agency here in London, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our home for some very open, honest and real conversations with some absolute A-players in e-commerce right now. So, without further ado, let's do this. Sarah, Andre, I am so excited to be having this conversation. Our very first Charl podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
Shall we just start off with some introductions? So I think all the listeners know who I am because I've already introduced myself. But Sarah, who are you? What do you do?
Okay, well, thank you for letting me join this first podcast. So I head up international e-commerce for the Cambridge Satchel Company. Been there almost 2 years. And yeah, excited to kind of be on this new journey as well with new Charl as an agency.
Yeah, super excited. Thank you so much for joining us. Honestly, we're setting that bar so high.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure at all. Andre, I mean, I know who you are. I have to work with you every day, but...
Absolutely.
Do you want to give us a little intro?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm Andre. So I'm the new business manager at Charl. So it's my honour to head up all of the sales operations for the agency. But yeah, I've been working in e-commerce the last 9 years or so. I think Charl is my fourth agency. So yeah, quite a few years experience in the
You're getting
agency.
around, Andre, honestly. Is it your fourth and favourite though?
Absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
The best so far.
Firm favourite.
Didn't pay you to say that. Amazing. So last 2 years, Sarah, Cambridge Satchel Company. Tell me about your story. Where do you come from? How did you get here?
Yeah.
Give me the background.
Yeah. So, well, almost 22 years in retail, which is really scary. Probably more actually. Started off shop floor when I was 16, working for women's fashion. So what was Arcadia brands back in the day. Finished university. Wanted a job, applied for hundreds, fell back into retail, started my first role in merchandising at M&Co as part of their graduate programme. Sort of sadly, M&Co is another one that's kind of during recent times exited the market. And then from there really on to Tesco, so a different department doing electricals, worked for Threshers, if any of you guys remember Threshers from back in the day.
I'm sorry.
That's me. I know, we're showing our age, exactly that. And yeah, so worked for them. So kind of done wine, apparel, electricals, then worked for Nike. So again, a very different brand. At that point, all doing, up until Nike, always bricks and mortar, very much focused there. Although when I was at Tesco, it was when they launched Direct, so their catalogue as well as their online business. It was kind of part of the start of that. Then moved to Nike, looking after bricks and mortar, their outlet stores and also their e-commerce. That was kind of my first foray into e-commerce. Then I worked for Fenchurch, which again, some of you may or may not remember, skate brands, so something completely different again. But really enjoyed that, launched their e-commerce, helped them roll out stores. From there to Wolverine, where I was for sort of 7, almost 8 years, and with them doing bricks and mortar and e-commerce, growing their e-commerce from 3 stores up to 48 stores across EMEA, and really then became completely e-com focused. So rolling out new stores onto new platforms. So we had what was ATG and a custom platform, moved those all onto Demandware, which if you've got experience with Demandware, what a challenge that was. But in 9 months, we managed to roll 48 sites out across the EMEA region, across 10 different brands as well. So
48 stores in 9 months.
Yeah, it was full on, but fun.
Did you sleep in that?
Not much.
Wow. I mean, I know we launched a lot of stores, but 48 in 9 months, that's a push.
Yeah,
that's a push.
It was insane because some of them were, as I say, some were on the ATG platform, some were on a custom platform. So it was kind of different types of migrations as well. And then from there, I joined Ted Baker after having my son. Again, pure e-commerce, so global head of. So looking at the UK, US, Europe, Canada. I feel like there's another one. Oh, did a bit of China. Mm-hmm. Again, lovely brand, sort of more premium nature. moved into lingerie, so worked for Curvy Kate and Bra Stop, again pure player, only e-commerce, had only ever been e-commerce as well, so actually they were a brand that was really interesting. The founder owner was super early to e-commerce, so about 16 years ago they'd launched their e-com store, so really had kind of some great momentum there. And then so almost 2 years ago now, joining Cambridge Satchel. So it's been a journey, and you know, I'm sure we'll talk to it, but an ever-changing environment. You know, I kind of left bricks and mortar because I could see it was coming, not to an end, because it's, you know, we're now seeing a new evolution of bricks and mortar, but definitely feeling like it was getting really tough again. Yeah. And then, you know, here we find ourselves in e-commerce post-pandemic, where we'd seen this amazing acceleration of the channel, and now things becoming a that little bit trickier, and you know, consumer behaviour changing yet again. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I imagine we're at quite a pivotal moment in the journey of how people are shopping, because like you mentioned, retail used to be everything, right? It was all bricks and mortar. And at that moment, did you see kind of business owners that you were working amongst, or leadership teams being quite against e-commerce? Was there a little bit of like, oh, I don't actually think this is going to be profitable, or it's the next fad that's going to be out the windows?
For sure. I mean, you know, it's interesting actually, because the things that they didn't want back in the day is what they're really keen to have now. So Wolverine's a great example, an amazing business to work with, obviously global, lots of brands. But we were a very small portion. So we were about 10% of the overall business at that time, with an aim to get to 30. But we were working alongside our wholesale partners, the bricks and mortar. But wholesale was obviously the big chunk of it. And it was interesting, kind of that, call it rub, you know, competitive spirit, you know, challenging when, as a, you know, I guess head of e-commerce, you're trying to sell your product at full price and give a great brand experience, when your wholesale team are selling into an Amazon or another sort of marketplace style, who, you know, have, I suppose, set maybe customer expectations that they're the cheapest, they're fastest to get to. So it was definitely an interesting one. And I think, you know, post-pandemic, because of the acceleration of e-commerce, I think that the shift has changed, and I think they look at e-commerce as the channel that's going to drive the most profitability. But I think we're at that next stage as well, where we all know paid channels are becoming more and more expensive to drive that traffic. So I think this is where the bricks and mortar, you know, are becoming important again, because then you do need all the different touch points. And the customer has become all powerful again. You know, it's a dynamic change, whereas during COVID, as brands and online retailers, you were kind of had the power really, because you could ship that product to them. You could not charge whatever price, but you could, it was really, you had a bit more of the power. And it's great to see actually the consumer becoming the all-powerful. And actually, I think really important for us is putting the customer at the centre of everything we're doing, you know, and becoming more customer-centric. And hopefully that will put us on a really strong path for success as we move to this next phase of what is e-commerce.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because even like in the early days of Charl, we used to actually see a little bit of pushback with e-com builds in the actual potential in the projects that they're embarking on. Really, it was like, oh well, we sell loads on Amazon, and that's going to be our primary channel. So we don't want to compete with ourselves. We used to hear quite a lot of that with some brands, or we worked with a lot of food brands in the early days of the business, and it was like, well, we don't want to compete with our own retailers. So all these considerations, and then I think throughout the pandemic, it was like a flick switched, right? We need to get in front of our customers. We need to start selling online. And I think that has really created like an entirely new wave of consideration around e-commerce, in terms of the way we talk to customers, the way we acquire them, becoming increasingly challenging, as you mentioned. But I think, like you said, we are really at quite a turntable in how people are buying, how brands are investing in different channels. And it's an exciting one, right? Because it breeds innovation, growth.
And it's consumers wanting to be close to a brand as well. So like the example with a food brand, yes, they're in the supermarkets, but consumers actually want to interact with that brand, and having an e-commerce site where they can do that, they can sign up to the loyalty scheme, they can really be part of that brand community. And I think consumers really want that now, and that's the shift that's definitely happened, I think.
Is that something you've seen recently, Andre? Because obviously you've been around the block with the agencies, right? So have you seen any changes in what merchants that are speaking to you about are asking for and what they want and what they're wanting back from an e-commerce store since working with different platforms such as Shopify?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have. I think now it's about retention. That's what I'm finding when I'm talking to brands. You know, retaining customers is so important, whereas I think previously it was much more about acquisition. How do we get more customers? And I think now we're in a climate of, well, you know, it's great getting more customers, but actually how do we retain them? And, you know, I get quite a unique perspective talking to brands because, you know, it's different things are, you know, important to different types of merchant. But I think one thing that I have seen certainly over the last few years and pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, it was about previously increasing conversion rate, average order value. I'm seeing lifetime value as a much more important metric now for brands. So it's kind of like how we've got these customers, how do we keep them, and how do we maximize the value from these customers as well? So we're definitely seeing loyalty as a more important thing. You know, brands that previously didn't really have a loyalty scheme in place are now thinking about it much more deeply. Subscriptions, obviously, really important to food brands in particular. But it's about having a seamless kind of experience for the customer between those things as well. You know, from top of the funnel, you might engage them with a SMS, a text message, get them into your loyalty journey, then get them into a subscriptions kind of journey as well. So yeah, lifetime value is super important to brands at the moment. That's definitely what I'm hearing from merchants.
And I guess that actually presents a bigger challenge for you, Sarah, given that your products are super high quality. They're made for life, right?
Yeah.
Is this something you guys are seeing internally around retention? I'm you know, you don't have a replenishable product that's going to be eaten or disappear within so long.
Yeah.
So how are you guys finding that? Is it something you're thinking about?
Yeah, definitely. So we launched a loyalty program last year for this exact reason. You talked about community and kind of building a community. And I think it wasn't just about selling product. It was about actually, if we build this community, can we use real people to create content for us? Can we let these kind of loyal members or our community become our brand advocates or brand ambassadors like a Nike and some of these sort of sports brands that have done so well, you know, in that way. So we kind of did it from that perspective, but also now looking to leverage it. Instead of offering promotions, we're offering more loyalty incentives. So, you know, we've recently started doing more SMS, and obviously we want to try and up the subscription or the opt-in rate for that. So, you know, we're now offering additional points. If you're part of our loyalty program and you sign up to SMS, we'll give you X. So there is a value proposition, but it is about adding value to an existing customer. I think to your point, for us, it's a balance. I'm trying to do more and like obviously focus on that regular returning customer with the loyalty program, and also try to push that out. So it's actually a year coming up in a couple of weeks. So we're going to be doing kind of a anniversary and it's a way to communicate that message out. So if you're not part of it, join it. And it's not just about buying into the brand, as I say. You know, it's about things like signing up to all of our social channels. So there's a way to kind of, you know, improve the performance on those. If you have bought something, it's not just the purchase. Leave us a review and we'll reward you. Leave us an image review and we'll reward you. And we can then utilize that content again. One thing we're looking to maybe do moving forward as we launch new categories or new product ranges, you know, there'll be a period of time where you can maybe get additional points if you buy into that collection. So really trying to create that, as you say, really loyal customer, but feeling that we're giving something back, that we're not just taking from that customer, that we're hopefully giving back. And as I say, using them to kind of be our brand ambassadors. You know, no one's better at telling a great story when they've had a great experience than a customer, I think. Absolutely. And I think we all know that social proofing, more so than a like and something that maybe doesn't feel as authentic, like this many sold in this period, actually hearing from another customer that you really love that brand or that product, that experience, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I saw a very skeptical LinkedIn post, I think it was like a month ago, that was saying that everyone's talking about retention, but reality is it's far too expensive for most businesses to do, and that most customers don't really care about the community the brands are building, and they just want to buy nice products. Now, I tend to disagree with most of that statement. However, I think you're obviously in a really interesting spot where you get to see tangibly what customers are saying, and I'm sure you work closely with like your customer service teams. Do you believe that people really get wedded into a brand and they really kind of get bought into this community that us all in e-commerce talk about so often? Is that something you really see tangibly with your customer base?
Yeah. I mean, the sort of, I guess the straight answer is yes. So when it comes to those that have joined the loyalty program, I can't tell you how on it they are. If they've completed a mission or an act or whatever, and those points aren't on there, they are straight onto customer service, which shows how engaged they are. Yeah. And actually the stats that we've got is that customer is spending twice as much as a customer that's not part of the loyalty program. Their UPT is up, their sort of repeat visit, like everything is just so positive in terms of that. It is a small portion right now, and that is the reality. And I think we will always need a mix as a brand, because as you just rightly said, it's not a perishable product. It's not a subscription warranted range. As much as I love our brand, there's only so many bags I think any one person needs. So, it's never we're always going to need to be bringing that new customer acquisition is always going to be super important. But I think actually, if you look at your profit line, you need to balance, you need to still invest in that existing customer, because it's not costing you as much to drive them back each time. And if nothing else, they could then, maybe they're not ready to purchase that time, but they could communicate to a friend or someone else who they know is going to a wedding or is graduating soon. Look, this is a great brand. Look at all their great products. I bought from them before. I love it. So it might not even be a purchase for them. It's like a word of mouth almost that they're doing for us as well. So no, I think that I get the maybe that sort of feeling that there's not the brand loyalty, but I don't believe that's true. Look at Nike. Look at some of these guys that are at the moment declaring a massive increase in revenue and why is that? That's because people are loyal to those brands still. 100%. And, again, I'd kind of talk Nike because from a marketing perspective, they're a machine, but they do so much around their community. They do so much around from a grassroots all the way up to kind of the big celebrities and sports endorsements. They do a lot at grassroots, which kind of starts it. So that's our strategy, to try and really get our customer to be that ambassador for us.
Yeah, I mean, we only see positivity with our merchants rolling out loyalty, subscriptions. The numbers really speak for themselves. I obviously don't have that tangible hands-on experience with D2C customers daily, but I think from what our amazing brands that we work with, we only hear positivity, quite frankly. I think to kind of touch upon what we spoke a little bit about earlier is around there being a shift again. Through the pandemic, we saw e-commerce levels going through the roof, right? In terms of people shopping online, way ahead of where we thought it was going to be over the kind of course of the last 10 years. There's a lot of noise that e-commerce is struggling right now, and there's less people spending online, and that it is harder than ever. What's your view? What are you experiencing right now?
You're right for me to take this one. I think it is. I think what's interesting, having just been at an event this morning with IMRG, across the board conversion rates have dropped quite significantly. However, customers will, I think, it's a shift in behaviour. So I think if you're a multi-channel retailer, which we are, it's not so bad. If you're a pure player, no one can get your product elsewhere, you're all right as well. I think what we're seeing is customers definitely returning to stores, wanting that feel, touch experience again. And I think it's our job on e-commerce to start trying to do that. So deliver a kind of more of an in-store experience or support the in-store experience. And maybe, what we're doing in our business is not thinking so much around e-commerce, your bricks and mortar, is actually the total customer experience and how we can take the offline to online and vice versa and try and make it as seamless as possible. To not seeing it necessarily as just an e-commerce customer, but it's a customer, and how do we best deliver them a great service.
So I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like 2-3 years ago we were saying retail's dead. How are we gonna make it survive? And it was the conversations that I would always have and be having is that retailers need to start creating very experiential experiences in store so that customers really get to understand the brand, and it's not about just showing product, it's about almost bringing them into the brand journey. And it feels like we're almost doing a 360 again from a world where it was like sell, make sure it's so quick to buy, get people straight through that add to cart checkout funnel. Now we're kind of taking a step back and go, how can we educate in the same way that we do in retail? It's interesting how the tables are almost turning again, but I think it probably all goes back to the fundamentals of how do we engage a customer end of,
yes,
right?
Exactly that.
People respond in a similar way in store probably to online. It's just the way the execution to it is completely polar opposite, right? So I think it's interesting. Andre, what are you seeing in terms of brands that are talking to us right now around pain points, challenges? Are people finding it hard?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And I think budgets are tighter than ever. And I think it's interesting to see, how the economy filters down throughout every single business. And I think, right down to the individual level with people struggling to make ends meet. And I think obviously that's going to affect retail. Now, just going back to the pandemic for a second, online retail was up 19% in 2020. Now, it's always going to seem a bit of a crash after a huge year of growth like that. But, at the time during the pandemic, I was working for a personalization platform, and the merchants that we worked with, it was all about, well, sales are up, but how do we deliver an in-store experience online? And it was all about, getting customers to find products they needed quicker, through personalization tools, things like, smart cross-sells and upsells, relevant kind of merchandising, but also personalized content as well. So remembering what they previously viewed in their last session and showing them different banners, different offers based on what they're more interested in. So personalization was kind of huge during the pandemic, I found. I think now, as I mentioned before, I think merchants are really trying to retain customers, and I think obviously acquisition is really important too, but it's so competitive. Just in terms of commercials, it's so competitive. Even on within my role with merchants, budgets are tighter with a lot of brands. So I'm just seeing it super competitive when it comes to pricing, and I think the brands are feeling that as well. Everybody's feeling it across the board in terms of that competitive nature, and purse strings are tight for everybody. So that's what I'm seeing.
One thing I've really noticed over the kind of like last 5 years of Charl is people are seeing websites really differently, and in e-commerce stores completely differently now. Historically, it was, we need a store. It was a functional requirement to a business, right? We need to sell online. We need people to see our products. We need them to be able to check out easily. Now it's different. That's the foundation. I think the conversation I've been having very recently is that brands are really savvy in the sense of, well, how's that going to impact our conversion rate? Why are we going to invest to roll out this feature? Is it actually going to make any form of difference to our business? Whereas I think, dare I say it, historically, there was a bit of a tick boxing exercise of, oh, we're doing the loyalty bit. Oh, yeah, we've got our email marketing set up. Great. Now, I think we are seeing our merchants so down to the bone of the numbers, and every change has to be accountable to a specific improvement for a specific KPI that we're wanting to improve. And I think, Sarah, your team are amazing at being really specific with specific goals to why we're doing things. Has that always been the case for you guys?
I think it was something that I kind of maybe had been there prior to my time, but certainly when I joined, I'm being in bigger businesses, although there's more money there, generally you're having to sign off a business case or, a business plan. And so I kind of introduced a bit more of that. And why are we doing that? Why are we spending that money? And I think also like to then be able to measure, was that the right thing to do? Because otherwise, to your point, I think there was a time when, because people didn't know enough about e-commerce, you could probably get away with getting things signed off a lot easier. And like you say, it was like they wanted to have a site. So actually, yeah, that's fine. I want to have a site because that's what we should do. Whereas now everything is very much KPI driven. What's that going to give us incrementally? Why are we doing that? Why are we not doing this? I think there's a lot more people in our business invested now in e-commerce. I think it's our job to educate, and I think that's where the business cases come from, is actually we can collectively, so with us obviously we put together a forecast of why we were going to be changing the site, what opportunities. It gives us a baseline to then be able to kind of check that performance, and was everything, that initial hypothesis, correct? And obviously, even since we've done that, let's be honest, the environment has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And because I mentioned to you earlier on that yes, conversion rates have dropped, but we've done so much this year. I think our conversion rate could have been a lot worse than where it is now without doing some of these things. So yeah, definitely more eyes on e-commerce, more wanting to understand the outcomes of spend. And yeah, I think for me, mentoring the team as well, I think it's important that they understand if you spend something, there needs to be an outcome, and that's the best way to kind of report it, is having kind of a business case.
I think it can be so easy when we're like on an agency retainer, for example, and your hours are rolling. It can be so easy to kind of just go down the list. What's the next thing we're doing? Tick, done that next landing page, done, without that kind of like strategic foundation flowing through it. Why are we doing this again? What's the KPI we actually want to improve? We're going to spend significant money on delivering this new feature. Are we going to track it? Are we going to test it? I think we're seeing this like so much more with our brands, which is great, right? It's pushing everybody's abilities to that next level. And whilst it is a bit hard right now, and e-commerce is a struggle to push, and we're not seeing the levels of revenue that we might have seen a couple of years ago, I think it is making us all better at our jobs. I definitely feel like that, because we're having to go, right, well, now we don't make profit on our first purchase anymore because it costs so much to acquire a purchasing customer. How do we now get that customer to come back again, and there we make our profit?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry to interrupt, Nick. So I think, just sort of 9 years ago when I started in the e-com world, I think it was much more a bit of a box ticking exercise of we need this feature in our store. I think now brands are thinking much more about the experience of the brand itself. What are our values? What are our USP? The other thing I'm hearing from so many merchants at the moment, sustainability, traceability. Where are our products sourced from? This is so important, especially obviously to the younger generation. And I think brands are thinking much more about this now. Craftsmanship, obviously really important to the Cambridge Satchel Company as well, Sarah. So, I'm seeing that a lot more, rather than we need loyalty, we need subscriptions, we need personalization. It's much more about, how does the customer experience our brand? What do we want to get across as well in terms of our brand values and our USPs? And yeah, merchants are thinking much more about that, and it's almost as important, if not more important, than the actual features of the e-com store itself.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think, well, while we're talking about features, let's just take the lid off SMS. This SMS drama the conversation that we have probably every single week is like, have you considered SMS? And more times than not, people go, oh, it's no, our customers wouldn't like that. Now, Sarah, I think what was always really interesting when talking with you was that you were quite pro SMS, right? You it's something that you've gone, yeah, let's give it a shot. So I think if you'd asked me like 2 years ago about SMS, I think the first thing I'd probably think about is like Domino's Pizza or texting my mum. Like, I don't think I'd really see it as a viable acquisition channel of customers or retention channel to get customers coming back. And I think personally I would have found it quite annoying. And we hear this time and time again across the merchants that we serve and work with. But we can't get over those 99% open rates or whatever they are. They're absolutely crazy.
The conversion rates are insane. So we launched it or started doing it last Black Friday. And I think it's an interesting one. I think it really depends on the market. So for the UK, unfortunately, SMS has been used by a lot of scammers. So Royal Mail was one that was done. There was quite a few where, again, so I think the reputation of SMS or the trustworthiness of SMS is the challenge. However, internationally and in the US, it is so mature as a channel. So what we did is we kind of launched it. We did a bit around VIP. So for our VIP customers, they got an SMS. When we launched the VIP sales, they got early access for a couple of days. And it worked really well. We did get a few customers going, is this a genuine, SMS from you guys? So I think For those that haven't done it, advice is make sure customer service are fully aware of everything you're doing so that they can validate it immediately. There's not a delay on them responding to customers coming back to you and going, did you send an SMS? Make sure you're looping in, because that really helps in terms of confidence in the customer. But we've now rolled that out to integrate with all of our email flows. So we have SMS as part of our email welcome flow. We have it as part of our abandoned cart. We have it as part of our loyalty program. So actually, as you're getting close to enough points to redeem against a product, we're reminding you. And actually, the conversion rates are insane, like ridiculous. It's not massive revenue for us. So what we're doing, and that's because of the opt-in rate, so we don't have loads, but now that's something that as part of our acquisition, especially lead gen, SMS is in there, and actually something that with the new site that we're building with you guys, we've included in our account page, from our sign up page. It's all natively built in, so it feels very natural, very normal. It's not a precursor. You don't have to opt in to it. You don't have to put your number in, but we're asking you at that stage, which we never would have considered before. And as I say, for the US, for the number of people we've got in the database, the revenue stream is phenomenal. So we definitely see, I think for the UK, it's yet to mature and yet to maybe become more, more stable channel. But for the US and some of the international markets, it's how they operate. It's very, very standard to them. So I think, if you are an international retailer, it's one that's worth considering.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd echo that completely. I think, any other channel, if you were getting 30-40% conversion rate, you'd be, you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And obviously the open rates help with that as well. People tend to read a text rather than an email, which they might put straight, into their bin. But yeah, I think there is a trust thing there, Sarah. Definitely in our culture, I think US are probably much more open to that as a channel. But I think we're catching up, and I do see merchants talking about SMS a lot more as a viable channel. And obviously it's working really great for you guys as well.
I think just one other thing to add to that, I think it also depends on the product. So I know talking to a couple of beauty pure players last year around this, we kind of did a review of Black Friday performance, and I'd asked them, how did it do? And it bombed for them, but they also have apps, and so they use push. So I think, depending on your setup, if you have got an app, push notifications kind of worked in the same way.
Yeah.
And actually, generally, if you've got the app, I think the customer's hyper engaged as well. And like you say, because it's a text, because it's a push notification, we've all got our phones on us so much now that it's just a really easy part of conversion. So that's what they found worked. But it's kind of the equivalent, if you don't have a mobile app, is SMS is kind of the next best thing, really.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think one thing that we've tried to do as an agency when guiding merchants is to consolidate features, because I won't lie, there's a lot of bloody features out there, right? There's gazillions, lists as long as my arm in terms of all the things that you could do on site. But we all know we have a finite amount of time, finite amount of resource that we can spend on making a site performant, great, good customer experience. Now, there's a lot of tech partners out there, and there's a bit of juggling between building things from the ground up, or bringing on board some great partners too. Now, I know you guys have got some amazing tech partners that are supporting some of the on-site features, but when I'm sure you get approached a lot by a lot of tech partners wanting to add their amazing new features to your store. What are the things that you're thinking, Sarah, when you're having to make a decision should we roll out loyalty? Should we roll out SMS? Do we need reviews? Is it going to impact brand, etc.? What are some of the things that, what's that decision making process for you when you're choosing it? Because do we not want to simplify? I always think some of the best practices within e-commerce is a simple customer journey, so we don't get too confused in that kind of purchase flow. But then at the same time, we know what impacts things like loyalty, subscription, etc. can have on revenue. So I'm really interested on what's your decision making process.
Well, I think, first of all, identifying that there is, like you say, could be sometimes up to 30 new vendors contacting me via email or calling me daily. Mm-hmm. So to actually cut through, what I kind of go, do I have a problem? Mm-hmm. Do I need a fix? Because actually, to your point, it's vanity, some of it. It's like, oh, that's something new, I should do it. Well, should I? And actually thinking about the customer, is that going to help my customer?
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of the time, so when I joined, we had probably a lot more third parties we worked with, but we're a very small team. It's not manageable. And actually, one of the first things I did was consolidate a lot of the partners we work with. So we really don't have that big a tech stack anymore. A lot of them are Shopify preferred partners. So obviously for integration reasons, for ensuring that they're we don't have breakdowns of the application on the site, so that they're are seen as that best-in-class partnership. That helps. But it was partly to do with ensuring my team could actually support this tech, because there's no point having something in place if you can't use it. I've worked in other businesses, I won't name the brand, but had invested massively in a CRM platform. And we're using about 1/10 of the application, but it cost in the millions, and they were using 1/10 of the capacity because it hadn't been implemented correctly, but also as a team, they just weren't able to support. So I think for me, it's identifying, do you have a problem? Is it going to help my customer? And can you actually utilize it to its fullest? Because if not, then, this tech isn't cheap often. No. You're making a big investment. So yeah, for me, there's probably a checklist of 3 things there. And we consolidated a lot at Cambridge Satchel, and so we can actually use the tools to their fullest.
I think it's so interesting, isn't it? Because it takes us back to those times it was the tick box exercise, right? I've got loyalty, yet done that. What's next? What have we got to add to our site next to see if it improves anything? But actually, like you said, they all require time to keep improving, right? You guys are really considering all the touch points of loyalty. I'm a big believer. If we're going to roll out a feature, then we should have it in every single step of the customer journey. Loyalty should be available on homepage, seen in cart, seen where you see a product card, etc., etc. So I always think, has your team actually got the time available to them to look at the data and go, right, we're spending X amount a month on a loyalty provider or a subscription provider or whatever. What's the impact? And in 6 months, are we going to review it and whether we need it, or is it just something in the back burner that's ticked the box and actually we're thinking, we're doing loyalty. I think it makes a difference. I have no idea. And another thing I think is quite interesting is phasing changes on a site as well, to be able to tangibly understand the impact, which probably gets us onto our next my personal moment, but the considerations around data in how we track things. I think obviously the launch of GA4, which I think is, we knew it was coming and caused many headaches. But how do you guys use data? Do you use data?
Yeah. So, GA4, obviously it's come, but it's not come. So we're still actually, this Monday, we're are the GA3 reports still working? They are brilliant, because actually what's coming through in GA4 at the moment still isn't making really a lot of sense. And Google themselves are saying, give us a few months for things to stabilize. But as an e-com business, I can't go to my board, sorry guys, I'll come back to you in 3 months when we're happy the platform's working properly. So I think, we're going to be looking at, we currently look at different platforms. So we use Shopify itself. And sometimes that is our complete source of truth in terms of the revenue, the conversion rate, and all the customer funnel as well, because that is the most like-for-like data set we have. GA, again, we use to make some decisions. We'll use specific platform data. So for PPC, most recently, we moved to using the in-platform data to actually feed the algorithm, which we've seen really positive responses, especially on things like PMAX campaigns, which I know people have seen a lot of instability, but using the in-platform data and metrics to actually feed the algorithm has really helped. So and the same with Meta. So we'll use Meta because, again, that's a constant. So I think in the short term, we'll revert to using in-platform data until we're happy that there's stability within the GA4 platform. The same with any of our other third parties. So with, Rakuten, Awin, etc., we'll use that data for like. Because obviously you have to have that metric, and you have to be able to make decisions there and then. We can't wait, as I said, for 3 months and go, okay, sorry, that spend was a bit of a waste of money. That's not going to be acceptable. No. It's certainly, I don't know if I didn't say this at the beginning. I worked with my dad from a very young age. And so I've always had this principle wherever I've worked that it feels like my money. So, and it's the same with this. I couldn't, hand on heart, allow myself to spend money without being able to kind of measure it in some sort of way. And I think, so I think, KPIs will change, the platforms we'll use will change, but eventually we'll come back to a set of reporting. What that looks like at the moment, honestly, I don't know. And I don't think anyone does. I mean, at this event this morning, like everyone's kind of going, GA3 is still kind of working, so I'm using that. And some of them are moving into other platforms.
Sorry to cut you off there,
okay.
Sarah. I think it's quite frustrating from Google's part, because we've gone from universal analytics, whereby we've got these pre-made templates of data that we all get so used to looking at. We can get a rough idea about what's going on site, right? Whereas now we've moved to GA4, which, let's be honest, is an analyst tool, right? It's a big bulk of data, i.e. your traffic, that you can then filter down to very specific targeted segments that we're looking at across site, which is okay, but we have to remember what all those segments are, and there's some really long lists in there. And I think for busy e-commerce managers who are juggling gazillions of other things on top of their plate, this is probably not going to be the biggest priority. I think I've got some of my own views on how I think it might go. I think now is a massive opportunity for a leader within a data platform is probably going to come through, and I think GA4 might not be quite the holy grail of how we understand e-commerce data moving forward, because it just requires far too much manual work. I think initially the onboarding has been quite poor. Across our merchants, we've seen very unreliable data sources. We've been leveraging amazing tools like Little Data that helps partners connect in a lot better. But we are seeing more and more merchants use platforms like Triple Whale, Dynamic Yield, because quite frankly, you just need to know your data, what's going on with your customers now. You haven't got a whole week to spend filtering down, creating your templates. Maybe Google bring out some templates. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all change is painful, right? But I think, speaking to lots of different merchants, that, all found the transition to GA4 quite problematic. And I think, just like you said, Nick, it seems to be built for data scientists and analysts rather than e-com managers, because the great thing about Universal Analytics was, like you said, you had all those reports pre-built there. You just logged in and you could review all the data. And, for me as well, when I'm defining strategies for merchants, I need to use data. And Universal Analytics was great because, you have those pre-built reports. So now it just takes that little bit longer. But it was interesting. I saw on LinkedIn, a developer had created a GA4 classic view, which essentially was a Universal Analytics looking version of GA4. And I think, he's identified a problem there and found a great solution, but yeah, it has caused challenges for lots of different merchants.
I think the way how they're measuring as well, I think within GA4 Google are measuring the way they want to measure, not necessarily the way their merchants want to. So in some ways I actually find GA4 easier because it's a bit like business objects or a BI tool that I've used as a merchandiser 20 years ago, where you can drag and drop and pull things in. Yeah. So I love that because I did sometimes find that quite hard in GA3. But if you look at conversion rate, they will include all engagements as a conversion. Well, that's not money in the till. Their measurements are interesting in that respect, which kind of feels like they're just giving you the data that they need to power their algorithm, which that might be quite controversial to say, but I think that is the reality, is that is what they're doing, because they're all about engagement. So their reporting is about engagement. But, we're all about, as I say, making sure we can, keep a business going is the reality of it. Yeah. So that for me is the biggest change. And, also getting the rest of the business who maybe might not have already been particularly savvy with the reports we had there in the first place to now understand this kind of new shift. I think for me, this is a massive sort of moment in e-commerce, actually, probably one of the biggest in terms of just how we start reporting. And I think it's really interesting. You talked about, we've been talking about business cases and, brands or retailers having to be careful with what they're spending. But actually, I think we have looked at a few of these tools to see what can speed up time, because if I can react to a report rather than be spending a day pulling a report, what's the advantage of that? And actually, that's going to be one of the next business cases I need to pull. There was a lot of people this morning talking about dynamic yield and triple whale using that because they're just saying that GA4 is like, yeah, they don't feel like going to be able to use it really, which is a real shame.
And I think there's another angle to this data dilemma that we're seeing is actually trust, because we are seeing merchants looking at the Shopify reporting and then they'll go into GA4 and all the numbers are different and nobody knows where to trust anymore, right? But I think tools like Triple Whale are great because actually they're very transparent on how they're attributing sales to different channels, and you can even change it and see different models, right? And I think we're seeing so much more skill within brand side that actually platforms have got to step up now and educate the merchants because merchants are questioning absolutely everything now because things are tight, right? They're tighter than ever. And I think somebody needs to really come in and absolutely overhaul split A/B testing. I think it's still messy, clunky, old-fashioned in its approach. Maybe Shopify could come and help with that. Who knows? I think heat mapping, we're still leveraging tools like Hotjar and so on, which are very heavy, tend to slow sites down, but also feel like the data is quite far away from everything as well. I think there needs to be a streamline, but then we've got two other types of data kind of platforms. We've got the ones that tell us what customers are doing on site, and then we've got ones that tell us who bought from where, right? And there doesn't seem to be one particular data channel that's combined all of those things. Maybe I'll make that platform and I can go live
This
on an
time
island
next year, be
and sell it.
millionaires.
That's it. Absolutely. Right, my last question, and it's probably going to be a controversial one. Discounting. What's your view? Do we discount when sales are dropping?
No. I think, look, we've just talked about, from the start, the cost of acquiring that customer. It's costing us so much more. I think also as brands, and it was something we've discussed at length, that Cambridge Satchel in particular has been on quite a journey. I know when we first spoke, Andre, about the brand, I joined about 2 years prior to me joining, so about 4 years ago now. We'd been a brand that would discount to drive revenue, simple as, that's how volume was done. They stopped that about 4 years ago and cut back really to only doing Black Friday and a winter sale. So equated to about 4 weeks a year they'd be on promotion, which for really any brand is a tiny portion. Even luxury brands you're seeing discounting at the moment. So which, obviously really hurt the business in terms of top line, but actually profitability brought it sort of, in a much better place. We reintroduced, a few more promotions last year, which, helped us essentially keep level, not decline like a lot of brands had year on year last year. But I think we've taken a stance where we're pulling back even more from promotions this year because I think, there's a lot of USPs that we've got in the brand. We're made in the UK. We're handcrafted by artisans. We're using sustainable leathers. There's so much that goes into the product that actually, we'd much rather a customer bought it full price and felt the value of it. And I know personally, there's brands that I used to really value, but by them discounting all the time, I've kind of now questioned, is there quality there still? With beauty brands, well, are they making an inferior product? Why can they sell it so cheap? And it's actually made me go elsewhere or shop with an alternative. So I don't, and I think that's fine. I don't mind a customer not spending or not shopping with us as often, but still shopping with us and buying a full price because everything else costs so much as well. But, we also believe in the value of our brands. And I think some of it is about that.
I think customers get really savvy as well. If they see you doing regular discounting, they're just going to go, right, well, I'll wait a bit. I'll see what happens. I'm terrible with my Gusto. If I pause it for a couple of weeks, I know I'm going to get a discount come through, and I know I'm probably going to go back onto it.
Yeah,
I think people get really considered in their purchases based on time of year. If the brand's known to discount a lot, because if you're going to get it cheaper, you're probably going to wait, right? Most products people will wait for if they think they're going to get it cheaper. That's why they wait for like Black Friday, etc., etc. Is there any consideration around the luxury market with features and discounting and things like that? Because we have some of our merchants which are super keen to like go out there with their kind of absolutely weird and wonderful campaigns that are built to drive engagement. But then we have a number of luxury merchants that are quite prude, actually, in the way that they consider new things. They're like, I don't want a progress bar within my cart. It's not luxury enough. It's too gimmicky. I think Cambridge is a really interesting positioning in the way that you position luxury. Is that something that you feel quite constrained by sitting within a luxury market? Or do you actually think that luxury brands can be a little bit more adventurous than just having their humongous campaign photo shoots plastered all over the website and nothing else?
So I think we don't consider ourselves luxury, sort of more affordable luxury, so more premium, I think. And I think because of that, we then can actually afford to do some of this stuff. But I think we've got to remember that actually even the customer shopping luxury is also doing their food shop at a Waitrose or a Sainsbury's or, or so these concepts aren't alien to them. I think you said at the beginning then, I think you're right. It's more about the fact that as a brand, are you uncomfortable with doing it? And I think it all depends on how you do it. So, with our progress bar, it's done in our brand guidelines. It's using the fonts, the colours. So it feels like it fits. I think if you do something that's too jarring, then I think you're right. It probably isn't right. But I think as long as you do it so that it feels just very natural to the site. And like I say, I think customers are seeing it on other parts of their day-to-day journey. So I think what you're doing is actually maybe introducing something that's more familiar to them than not. I think that's the approach I take anyway.
I completely agree. I see a lot of brands being almost overly protected, over brand, which I think it's tough. Let's go. Let's do everything we can to try and really deliver a good experience for customers. But then I've seen a few creative directors that are so fixed on that creative vision, which I know has a place in every brand, but in my view, there has to be room to trial and test and actually see the impact of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking to lots of different merchants, I think it does depend on vertical, I think, as well. So, something like Cambridge Satchel Company, you're potentially buying that product to last for years and years and years, if not a lifetime. So customers are probably willing to spend a bit more as long as they know the USPs and why it's actually that price, crafted in the UK, handmade, all those sorts of things. So, but, consumables, likely to be discounted because you want to get them in that subscription journey. You want to just acquire that customer and then you've got them on a sort of repeated, an extended lifetime value for that particular customer. So yeah, I think it's about getting across why the price is what it is. Certainly there's the concept of too cheap. I know that, having been in sales for 10 years, sometimes if you discount too much, it's like, well, why are you that low?
Yeah.
That actually is, there's an element of mistrust there if you do discount too much. So yeah, I completely agree with that, Sarah.
Yeah, I think customers are savvy as well. I think, sometimes, my mum's in her late 60s, but she'll recognise when a retailer's put their price up to do a 50% off discount. Yes. I think, there's a perception that consumers aren't savvy. They are very savvy. And I think, like I said at the beginning, I think that's why for me, they have to be at the heart of everything we do. You can't underestimate. And clearly the power of a customer right now, we're kind of all beholden to them, which is, not a bad thing, because I think that's where your brand values, as you say, as long as you've got really strong values, you can continue to come back to those.
Talking of values, I want to whip up the bonnet of the secret life of the Cambridge Satchel Company. Obviously, you head up the marketing and e-commerce team at Cambridge, and you've worked in a fair few teams in your wonderful experience. What do you think, Sarah, is like the absolute secret sauce to creating a really productive, talented and performant team and culture? What's your view?
I think communication, I think, is key. I think, maybe my team would say I over-communicate, but I think knowing where we're aiming, what our vision is, and therefore giving the team autonomy to deliver that within their individual functions. We have, I think, one of the healthiest cultures I've worked in Cambridge Satchel. It feels like a family, but that family is all aiming to deliver on that same thing. And that's why I think, there's people that have been with the business in the workshop since the business started. There are family members that have joined in the workshop. So you have mothers, fathers, daughters, cousins, which is great. And in the head office, we have people that have been with the business for 10 plus years. And I think that the kind of promotes a healthy culture. Because you can kind of go, well, why has that person stayed so long? And it's because it's such a great place, and it feels like you're working for a family, which is really unusual for the size business that we are, to have still that really kind of homely family style culture. I've never worked anywhere where if there's an issue or someone needs support, where people plow in the way that we do. It's not e-coms, that's brand. It's actually, if you see someone that needs support, we all just jump in and support each other. And again, I think that has helped keep the business where it is when times have been tough. Everyone's just been so passionate about making sure that this brand continues to grow and survives through some, challenging times.
Yeah, I think one idea that we've kind of like contemplated at Charl is like the idea of being very people first. Now, it sounds like really wishy-washy, doesn't it? It sounds like the corporate spiel that everybody says but nobody really acts on. And it's actually quite hard to actually sit down and go, what does it actually mean to be people first? The table tennis in the office, the away days, all this kind of stuff. But I think we've really pushed to have a really strong value around a strong culture at our agency, with the idea that actually if we're all working very well amongst each other, that's only going to pay dividends to the merchants that we're working with. Now, it's interesting. I think there's so many different ways to lead, and I'm quite a big believer in that culture often filters down from the leaders within a business, and actually then it's when the leaders are away that actually other people start becoming very protective over what has been built. So you hire that new person that's probably a wrong hire that starts coming in with the wrong ideas or the wrong attitude, and you start seeing other people going, that's not how we do things here, mate, kind of thing. And I think that's really interesting. But I actually think I'm really against like the whole leadership by fear type model as well.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say as well, Charl, that's one thing that really struck me about Charl. I've been here just over a year now, but in terms of culture, it's, one of the best, if not the best I've worked in. You can write me the check later.
Right. Can you stay on script, please, Andre?
But yeah, I think it's just about, not having a culture of fear. And I've had micromanagers before, and I've had a management team above me that has instilled that culture of fear, and actually people just can't wait to leave. They don't want to work somewhere like that. It's, people want to feel like they have a voice, and not afraid to speak up, share their ideas. And I think that's one thing that you've definitely instilled at Charl, Nick, is that, no one's afraid to speak up.
I think it's seen as quite an outdated type of management though as well. And I think, to be honest, I've worked in, having been in the industry for such a long time, and definitely worked under those kinds of management teams where, if you left at 5 o'clock, oh, you're leaving early today, that kind of thing, or no sort of appreciation of finishing a deck at 10 o'clock at night by your manager the next day. It was just, well, that's your job, that's what you need to do. I think there's a couple of shift changes. I think culturally, in the people and the generation that are coming up will not accept it, and it's good to hear, because I think as a sort of 80s baby, it was instilled in me, you graft. So even though you might have had a manager that was a bully or whatever, well, it's a job, you just crack on with it and you suck it up. But it's nice that that's not acceptable behaviour anymore. And for me as a manager, because I'd been through that, I would never dream of treating anyone like that. You don't get the best out of them. You just said there, an environment where you can actually give your ideas. When I recruit people, I kind of explain that there's no, anyone can input to any department. There's no you're not in that team, so you can't suggest. No, it's all healthy debate, conversation, so that we can all be better. A great idea for the finance team might not come from someone in the finance team because they're in it, but someone from the outside might go, oh, what about if we did this and this instead? So I think, the don't get me wrong, there are bad ideas, but I don't think there should be the thought that there is such a thing as a bad idea. I think everyone should have the opportunity. And, I put my crazy ideas out there, as you've been privy to, as have you, and the team will have a laugh. And then sometimes there's a golden nugget there. But that's how you get those golden nuggets, if you don't kind of get it all out there. And I think, again, that's another, we talked about retention, but retention of staff. When you lose someone that's been with the business 3-4 years, all of that wealth of knowledge, it's, you can't replace that. And the other thing you can't replace is the passion for the brand. And I'm so lucky. I have a team that are so passionate that I don't ask them to, but they'll check on their Pinterest ads over the weekend because they care so much about what they do. And I've given them the autonomy to do that channel or manage that channel or run that program, that they want to see how it does. They want to kind of, they kind of feel really, I don't know what the right word is, that it's part of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that autonomy, I think, is really important, like trusting people to do their job, and be there as a support if they need you, but actually ultimately trusting them. I think a lot of it's trust, and the micromanagers I've had, there's just been no trust there. And actually that's made me feel, well, actually, I'm not going to go the extra mile because, you don't trust me to actually do my job.
Sometimes you can actually end up making mistakes that you weren't going to make because they're on you. They're not giving that time to breathe.
Absolutely.
And, without realising you're doing that. And like you say, there's definitely, you look at my CV and it's quite obvious places that I didn't enjoy as much because it just wasn't there as long. Mm-hmm. And, again, there's the cost of recruitment, which is not coming down. If anything, there's fewer sort of really exceptional digital people in the industry. And so they're harder to get hold of. We're all after someone on SEO. So then that becomes a really expensive role. So actually, longer term, we talked about customer lifetime value, but it's also staff lifetime value 100%. And retention there. That I think is just as important.
You've got to enjoy what you do.
Well, that's the other thing. When you count up the years that you spend behind a desk or doing the job we're doing, to not enjoy it, it's just sacrilege now, I think.
I just absolutely love the idea of hiring people to tell you what to do rather than the other way around, which I think is so exciting. Like, I think I say this all the time. I'm like, guys, I'm all out of ideas. This one's on you. Like, actually just empowering other people to go, actually, here's our problem. This is what we're facing. This is how we're going to fix it. And I myself can actually come up with some ideas and be empowered to, not laughed at, not kind of like shut out the room when I come up with something stupid, to be able to just say it and go, and actually everyone goes, wow, that's amazing. Like Ross, who heads up our marketing, we're in a meeting the other week and we're coming up with, hence the podcast today, we're coming up with those ideas on how we can create amazing new content to kind of engage our own audiences as an agency. And Ross goes, I had this dream the other night where when Nick walks out the room, everyone starts like playing like inflatable saxophones and things. And I was like, Ross, I think we just have to start going to bed in the day now because we need more ideas like this. But I think that's like, there's so much power that you can bring to a team when people feel unleashed. Like, I'm not going to lie, behind the child scenes, we can all be pretty stupid. Like, we have some proper giggles, some things that we probably wouldn't be able to put out to the ether because we'd probably get in a lot of trouble. But we have a laugh. But then, when things are very serious, it's incredible to then watch those relationships really flourish and everyone go, right, game on. This is what we've got to achieve, or this is the problem we need to get over, or this is the goal we're focusing on. I think that's the value of building culture is in those moments. Rather just than that kind of step back. And I think I'm in two minds about the remote world. I still am, and it still conflicts me. Half of me loves the freedom of, I love the idea of people being able to work where they want, when they feel creative. Absolutely love that. But I also, me personally, sometimes I just need to be around people to really thrive. And I don't know what anyone says, but sitting looking at a Zoom camera or going on Google Meets, I just don't get that same connection that I get when I'm with somebody in person. Mm-hmm. So I'm in camp hybrid me. I think it's important to meet regularly. I don't think that the world should be completely remote. I think it's quite sad for the future of our workforce as well in terms of talent sharing, knowledge sharing. I'll be terrified being like a new junior person now, joining and just having a call in the morning, not knowing what I'm doing, and then scratching my head for the rest of the day.
I think human nature, like, we need to, like we're doing today, you need to have that human contact. I know I particularly struggled with it during COVID. I was desperate to just one day, but to be around people. As much as I love my husband and my son, it was nice to kind of have a mix of other people. So I was probably one of the first people back in the office. It was not at Cambridge Satchel, it was another company I was working for. I think it's nice to have both, because I think it's also a retention strategy for your staff. To have that flexibility is important, and not everyone is maybe like you and I, Nick, or you and Andre as well, that is happy around people. Some people, that's actually a really uncomfortable situation for them. So it's nice to be able to have the balance. And I think, just going back to your previous point about building teams, I think one of the things that I am very aware of is that, well, with all of us, none of us are perfect. I have skills that are definitely my weaker skill sets, and I draw on my team. So creativity, I think I'm creative. I mean, these are often the ideas that the team will be like, yeah, that's not doable, Sarah, that's not possible. But I leave them to kind of come up with those ideas and really use my team strengths where I have weaknesses. And I'm not afraid anymore. I probably would have been maybe 5-6 years. I'm not afraid to say, actually, I'm not very good at that, but you are in my team. So do you know what? You take the lead on this, and I'm here if you need me to support you. But actually, you're much better at this than I am. And I think that also helps, recognizing individual team strengths and calling it out across the team, because that just builds people's confidence and again, maybe their authority within the team or wider business as well.
And actually them seeing you as a human, right? That you're like, yeah, I fuck stuff up every now and then. Like, it's normal and it's okay, and we don't punish it. I think that's when the fun really starts beginning, when people feel kind of like unleashed to go and give something a shot. That's when you start, because 9 times out of 10 it might not work. That's fine. That's part of everyone's progression. But that every 1 in 10, that's when those like real gold moments happen, where it's like, damn, this is the moment that we've all been kind of waiting for. And it takes trial and error, right?
Definitely.
It really does. Cool. So obviously hiring is like the one thing that I think every manager and business owner like dreads, right? Let's be honest, it's hard, because the expectations are so high. You want to find someone amazing, and sometimes the people applying might not hit those expectations, and then you're thinking about how it's going to impact the wider team. How do you hire, Sarah? How do you get that absolute A player on board?
Well, do you know what? It's something I actually really enjoy, although it is very labour intensive.
It's just me.
Recently done it. Well, I like chatting, so I get to meet new people, so I kind of take it from that. But I think I'm always really transparent, regardless of where I've recruited. If they're joining a shit show, then I tell them they're joining a shit show. And I think sometimes that then kind of stops that person kind of leaving, but also kind of gives you it's fairer on that person joining. You get an interesting reaction. Some people will very quickly not want to proceed any further, and they're probably not the right people for you anyway. But I kind of feel then they're joining completely eyes open. I think also ensuring that, they are coming to you already with ideas. So generally in my hiring process, I will ask the person to prep what they think they'll be doing in the first 6 months, identifying what they think that is. That kind of helps with a bit of a roadmap around their probation as well. So, they might have had all these ideas, but can they actually implement them? Or was it, a presentation rather than a reality? I will tend to kind of have about 3 stages. One will be initially a Zoom or a Teams to kind of go through their CV. Then I'll look at bringing them in to meet them face to face, because again, as you said earlier on, a Zoom, a Teams, you can't necessarily you don't get the feel of someone's energy, what they're like in person, the dynamic there. And then normally I'll introduce them to the team and some other managers, so that actually we're not just saying, do they fit within the e-com team? Do they fit the whole culture of the business? And we have not hired certain people where I've had other managers going, do you know what? They just don't feel like the right fit. Because longer term, as you said before, the impact of the wrong person being hired can actually be really damaging. So it can be quite a long process, my recruitment process, but I feel that it's always been the fairest on both parties. Person coming really knows what they're coming into, and I feel like I've done my due diligence, because it is a big investment in your time as a hiring manager. There was a period at Ted Baker where I think the first 3 months I was there, that's all I did was hire new people. There was a lot of vacancies there. And I really enjoyed it, but it was so important that I nailed every single person that we brought in. Maybe I'm a bit weird, but I do enjoy the process.
Yeah, I think you are a bit weird about that. Do you know what? For me, it's like I just want to absolutely nail it, and I think the pressure of that can sometimes get in the way of the enjoyment for me, because we'll normally see like 600 applicants for one job ad quite quickly, right? And it is a job and a half trying to, when CVs look very similar and you're like, I know there's somebody amazing in there, how do I find them quickly? I think that's the challenge. One other thing that we've tried to do more often with some of our more recent hires is actually bring in somebody from a different department of our business and get them just to have a 10-minute chat with them and give them the culture tick. Do you think they'll fit in? They're not there to assess their skills. They're not there to assess anything, but do you think they're going to fit in and be part of the culture that we're fostering here? Because, I'm super passionate about culture, but when I hear other people in the Child team talk about culture, it's almost like we've built an army that protects what we all really love, which is the way we collaborate, the way we pick each other up, as you mentioned, when things are a challenge. And I think there's been times where we've said no to some amazing applicants because there's been this other cross-check where I said, I don't think they're going to fit in. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be a good check. And it's pained me, but we have absolutely stuck by that. And so far, it's hard to know because you can't go back and take that person on. But I think it's a really good way of getting somebody that's not biased by, they might be the best customer success person in the whole wide world, but they're terrible at collaborating with a team.
Yeah. I always say, actually, the fit is more important than the skill, because you can train someone how to do a task. You can't train them how to kind of fit in from a personal perspective. And I think that sort of external check is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually seen that, within an agency where the wrong person has come in, and actually that's led to a huge exodus of staff leaving. I have actually seen that, and that was really detrimental. So, when I was hiring, when I was account director, people fit was as important to me as their skills. It really was. Anyone can list their skills on a CV. When you meet that person, are they the right fit? Not just for this team, but as you said, Sarah, for the whole business, and the whole company culture.
And we're quite small at Cambridge Such. There's not, hundreds of us. We're in the tens. So I think, if you've got 30, 40 people in an office, it only takes really one or two bad hires to really kind of rot what is a very healthy culture. So I think it's probably more important in the smaller scale businesses or smaller teams, because that one person actually can have a lot more impact than if you're 1 in 1,000, where actually maybe you just need to do a job and it's then maybe unlikely as a culture. I know certainly when I went to Tesco, I don't remember being a culture other than work hard. Play hard a little bit as well, but certainly work very hard. But there wasn't that sort of, there was definitely a lot of people I could think of that maybe weren't the right person, but they did a great job. And so that was what was really important at the time.
And I think what you said about just being so honest in that recruitment process, I think we always try and give a little bit of our personality over, because I actually think the interviews go two ways. It's definitely we need to sell ourselves to you. When you're talking to some amazing talent, I'm sorry, but they're going to have a lot of people wanting to hire them, and you're going to they're going to be interviewing you at the end of the day. That's kind of my view. You really are. But when you kind of said, like, if it's a shit show, you need to tell people it's a shit show, because there are people that absolutely thrive in that messy startup hustle culture. Everything's going wrong, but we kind of like the adrenaline gets us through. There are people that absolutely thrive in that. And then there's there's different sorts of people that are very process driven, and they're best suited in kind of more established businesses that have made the mistakes 200 times over and corrected it time and time again. So I think that honesty piece is, because they're only going to leave like a month later, aren't they, when they turn up?
I've been on the other side of it, where you thought you were joining a company or business, pre-child, where you thought it was one thing. I'm sure you've been in that
absolutely
position,
have.
and then you join, and then it's like, shit, what have I done? Because you might have actually been waiting 3-6 months to join this business, and all of a sudden you're like, why did I do that? Because you're not being sold the truth. And I think, like I say, we talked about the cost of it all, but I think it's not fair on either person, really. It's not fair on the person you're bringing in, and certainly not fair on the potentially the rest of the team that you're impacting as well.
No. Well, look, guys, what a conversation that we have just had. I think we just put the whole world to rights, from data to hiring. I think there's some real nuggets in there. So thank you so much for joining me for our first ever Charl Chats, the e-commerce podcast. It's super exciting. But yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you. I feel honoured to be one of the first featured. So
Honestly,
thank you
it's
very
a
much.
it's a bar to beat now.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining our first Charl Chats, the e-commerce podcast. Please do subscribe, head over to our website, join our newsletter, and you'll be the first to know when episode 2 launches very soon. Cheers.